Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Breaking news, the Bills did not win the Super Bowl, and we all had that wrong on this podcast. With that, welcome to the Sports Ballers. My name is Eric. I've got hosting duties today. I'm joined by Corey and Evan. As always, how you fellas doing this fine Monday evening?
I'm doing pretty well. I think that was the first show we've ever had that did not begin with hello.
I didn't feel compelled to start with hello. We spent the whole football season, and by we, I mean mostly me, but sometimes you guys too, saying the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl, and, well, we can officially say that didn't happen.
I would say that Evan, most of all, because he was very stubborn. He never came off of that wagon. Like, you and I briefly were like, maybe some teams, circle the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Maybe the Bills aren't going to win the Super Bowl. Evan, from day one to day whatever it is now, has been the Bills are winning the Super Bowl, and nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't get it done. They played bad. They had home field advantage, and they screwed it up. So, they have nobody to blame but themselves and their own lack of execution.
Well, we will get to the football a little bit later in more detail. We've got a little bit of NBA stuff to cover as well. But first, I want to start with some of the things in our other topics, which is only one thing. We talked about Ed Reed taking the job at, correct my pronunciation again, Evan, if I get it wrong, Bethune-Cookman. Bethune-Cookman, right?
Bethune-Cookman.
Right. Well, Ed Reed took the job there, sort of following in the same footsteps as Deion Sanders at Jackson State, accepting an FCS job and a job at an HBCU. But this one didn't have such a fruitful outcome because Ed Reed couldn't stop running his mouth about his new school that he works at. Apparently, when Ed got to campus, his office was unclean. It hadn't been cleaned out, which is a legitimate beef. Your office should be clean when you step into it, and I think that it's understandable to be a little bit irked by that. But I also don't think you should be outing the school on social media, right? Like, you shouldn't be on Instagram ranting about how crummy your new employer is, like you're a 14-year-old working at Starbucks or something like that. Like, you ought to have a little bit more maturity, especially as a grown-ass man who is probably, in his 40s. You should be able to handle that with a little bit more decorum, especially in a circumstance where we're talking about schools that have been marginalized, underfunded, kind of passed over historically. You're not supposed to make yourself the story and how aggrieved you are compared to them, especially as a relative outsider. And I think that he tried to make himself bigger than the program here a little bit, and I think that caught up to him.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Like, if Ed has all these gripes, which are legitimate, some stuff needs to be kept in house. And Ed needs to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So by, social media being the necessary evil that it is in today's world, that doesn't help. So, I'm not surprised that the school did what they did, right? You're supposed to hire this guy who's supposed to be, one of the champions of your school, and instead he hadn't even signed the contract yet, and he's saying how terrible it is. So, if I'm the president of that school, you know what, just get this guy out of here. He's not going to help.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add to that one.
Well, with that, we'll talk a little NBA real quick. Some interesting news just happened today. The Washington Wizards traded Rui Hachimura to the Los Angeles Lakers for a couple of second-round picks and Kendrick Nunn, who I think is actually playing after he supposedly bumped his knee on a coffee table and was never to be seen again for 3 years.
Years.
But anyway, to me, a lot of people on social media are pissed off at the Wizards for this trade, where I don't really see it that way because you're the Wizards. How good could any of your players actually be? Like, how much of a return do you expect any of them to get when they play for your team and don't make them better? Right? Like, if your team sucks and he's on it, that either says that he doesn't have enough of an impact to make the team good, or he's just not good enough in his role, which means he's not going to help a team win a championship, so they're not going to offer a huge haul. They got a couple late-round picks. You should be happy with that, right? Like, that if that was what the market dictated, that's what the market dictated. And I can't imagine the LA Lakers championship odds have dramatically shifted because they traded for Rui Hachimura, who's going to require an extension at some point that the Wizards clearly weren't interested in giving him, probably because they gave all the money to Bradley Beal. But Rui Hachimura, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I enjoyed watching him play. I thought he had some potential, and maybe LeBron can extract that from him, but I just don't see him being a high-impact player, and I don't see why the Wizards fan base, as jaded as it usually is coming for people's necks over this. There's plenty of other things that they have messed up in the past, but the understanding is that this guy wasn't that good in the first place. Otherwise, he wouldn't be getting traded. He'd be helping the team win. But
Alex Mayo doesn't seem to be too thrilled with the move. He just posted, only the Wizards can make the Mondayest of Mondays feel even more like a Monday.
I don't understand. I get it because he was a player on the team. He was in the starting lineup. But
He was a player on the team.
yes, a player on a bad team who shot like 33% or 34% from three, averaged like less than 2 assists a game, 13 points, was an okay defender. Like, I don't see the hang up here. Like, this to me feels like another Wizards pick where I think I said this maybe on this podcast. I mentioned the fact that the Wizards haven't actually offered a second contract to any of their draft picks outside of like the picks that were in the top 3. So John Wall obviously got an extension because John Wall was a can't-miss prospect. Bradley Beal was the 3rd overall pick, and Otto Porter, I believe, was the 3rd overall pick as well. Those are the only guys that got extensions from the Wizards. Everybody else, they were like, no, this guy sucks. And they either trade him off for peanuts like they just did, or he's out of the league. And that appears like it's going to be the case with Rui Hachimura. He's already gone. It's probably going to be the case with Denny Avdia. It's going to be the case with Johnny Davis, who they drafted this year. So it's just a bad organization that doesn't know how to, get it. Yeah, I just mentioned a whole bunch of people. You have no idea who they are, Evan. That's the point. Like, I know you're not a basketball fan. You're not an NBA fan. But normally you've at least heard of some of the people whose names I utter on here. And that was like 0 for 4 talking about the Wizards. So
Yeah.
my point exactly.
I feel like if you're a Wizards fan, and you're worked up about this, you need to relax, okay? The Wizards are a garbage franchise. They've never been any good ever. So the fact that they're trading away one of their bad players on this bad team, great. So what? They're going to lose more. They already lose all the games. So, just what are you complaining about? They got some second-round picks that they're going to screw up. So, the carousel just keeps going around.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far, Evan. Like, unlike the Washington Football Club, like, the Wizards actually have had some years in our lifetime where they were, like, quite competitive. The Agent Zero years with Caron Butler and Antoine Jameson.
Did they go to any conference finals?
No.
Oh, okay.
But the Washington football team hasn't made it to an NC championship game. In fact, they've maybe made 1 divisional round appearance in our lifetime, or was it 2? It's not very many.
They won the Super Bowl in our lifetime.
Well, your guy's lifetime, not mine.
Yeah, that's true. Corey wasn't around yet. He's like 5 days late.
Oh.
And of course, none of us, we weren't self-aware either, so it basically doesn't count. In our time watching football, even if you date that to when you were really, really young and you just happened to be around and it was on the TV, the Washington Football Club, I think they made it out of the divisional round in 1999. They won 1 playoff game that season with Brad Johnson.
Yep.
And then they won the 1 playoff game against Tampa with Sean Taylor recovering the fumble and diving into the end zone.
Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
Those are the only 2 times because they never got a bye. So There's no automatic seeding in the divisional round, so they've only been there twice. Certainly no conference championship games since they won the Super Bowl back in 1992. But the Wizards also are the only, like, they haven't won 50 games in the regular season in over 40 years. Everybody this century has done that except for the Charlotte Bobcats / Hornets. And, well, that's not where you want to be compared. So it's been a pretty god-awful run for the Wizards. And I would say they're the most hopeless team in the NBA because every other
Knicks, or the Kings.
The Knicks are actually probably going to make the playoffs, and the Kings are good, man. They're a 4 seed in the West. They've got something going on, right? I'm not saying they're going to win championships, but they're interesting. Like the Kings look good enough to not only make the playoffs, but to win a series in the playoffs, right? Like you could see them in the second round this year if they end up matched up with the right person or right team in the first round. And the Knicks are winning some games. Like they're competitive in the Eastern Conference. So the Wizards are bad, and they're the only bad team in the NBA that doesn't realize that they need to tank, right? Like they're actually trying to win. They've built a team for the purpose of winning. They paid Bradley Beal all this money for him not to help them win, and they're just stuck. Like they're not going to be any good for probably until who knows if they're actually going to be good then, but they only have a chance to be good probably for another 5 years. It's insane. Like it's so poorly run. No, there's no plan, right? There's nothing here. And they, again, in terms of outlook and hope, 30th out of 30 in the NBA as far as I'm concerned. I can't think of a worse situation.
Not even Minnesota? What's going on in Minnesota?
Minnesota's got Anthony Edwards, right? Like they've got a future star, right? Like they at least have that, and they're at least probably going to make a play-in, if not the playoffs. Now, they certainly messed up. The Rudy Gobert signing, or trade as I should call it, was ridiculous, and it's been a disaster as predicted by your boy and several other people. But I don't think that compares to what the Wizards are. They have no juice.
What about Detroit?
Detroit's got Cade Cunningham, and they're tanking for Wembanyama or Scoot, right? Like they understand the assignment. They suck, but they're building young talent, and they're going to continue to do so, whereas the Wizards are not doing that.
Okay.
All right, so that's enough Wizards talk. I don't really want to spend all that much time, but they are my team.
Yeah, we'll talk more about them in 2024.
24, not 2034, or when Bryce Harper's contract ends. How about that?
By the way, a quick aside, I found it very humorous how Bryce Harper was doing like the promos for the Eagles, like the pregame rah-rah crap, like Mr. Philadelphia here and Bryce Harper. I'm like, he was in D.C. for what, like almost a decade? And the first time a D.C. sports team other than the Nats did anything was when the Caps made the Stanley Cup Finals, and he showed up to the bar wearing the other team's colors. So, Mr. Authentic Eagles fan, my ass. Just phony baloney. He just knows that he couldn't get away with that crap in Philly. DC fans are a little soft. Philly fans, he might have been run out of town, MVP or not, World Series appearance or not.
I was up in Philly on Saturday afternoon. We left in time to get back here before the game started, but I was wearing a blue DeMatha Cross Country hoodie. And thankfully, I also brought a light black jacket to put over top of it because I was getting a little bit nervous that somebody might mistake me for a Giants fan in that city.
Well, they had a lot of fun beating the crap out of them, so maybe you would have gotten a pass anyway.
The 5-year anniversary of them beating the Vikings by the exact same score.
I don't want to talk about that Vikings team. Anyway, let's talk some other stuff. The Golden State Warriors are, if they could be on my list, they would be, because they are the most unserious defending champion I've ever seen in the NBA. They lost to the Brooklyn Nets, blew a 17-point lead. In case you recall, or don't recall, a couple weeks ago on this podcast, I told you Kevin Durant is not playing right now. So losing a home game.
What's wrong with him now?
He sprained his MCL a couple weeks ago. We talked about it on here. But he was out, and the Warriors, who are effectively fully healthy at this point, found a way to blow a huge lead to the Kyrie Irving-led Nets, who are not good. Like when Kevin Durant's not out there, the Nets are not that good of a team. They lost that game. They blew the Celtics game in Boston the other night. Like it's just Steve Kerr doesn't seem to have a focus this year. The front office doesn't seem to have a focus this year. You got Klay Thompson running 4 straight isolation plays when he's Klay Thompson. He doesn't isolate again on anybody, but he's trying to pick on little Seth Curry, little brother, and it just wasn't happening. You've got these young players who can't get any playing time because Kerr doesn't like them, I guess. So they're not developing. The front
What about
office,
that guy who sucks?
James
Wiseman? Yeah.
He hasn't even been suiting up because he sprained his ankle a couple weeks ago in practice.
Jeez.
I mean, it's just they're 23 and 24 at this point. Like we're almost 2/3 of the way through the season. At some point, you got to get serious, right? Like you've got to actually start winning games and start jockeying for position in the Western Conference to try to win the West again. But they're currently on the 10 seed.
Ooh.
Like they're barely a play-in team as of right now. And it's just like you've been waiting for the last 3 weeks, basically, for them to figure it out. Like they won some games against some scrub teams when Steph was out at home, but then proceeded to lose 3 in a row before they went on the road. And then they come back and lose this one. It's like every time they have a chance to get over 500 and actually make a push in a pretty weak West that hasn't really taken off like people thought it would, they're just sleepwalking through the season. And there doesn't seem to be any trade imminent to make the team have more depth. There doesn't seem to be any interest in anybody playing something resembling team basketball. Steve Kerr's throwing out these goofy starting lineups just to be cute. Like you can be cute when your team is solidly in the playoffs. You can't do that now. You messed around the whole season. And I don't know what the hell they're doing.
I do.
What are they doing, Corey?
They're purposefully trying to make it to the play-in so that they can become the first play-in team to win the NBA Finals. They're messing with you.
They're messing with me specifically.
And, all of their fans.
And yes. The NBA just messing with the whole system, just saying, hey, we're gonna come in, we're gonna be the 7 or 8 seed, we're gonna take a Western Conference.
No, they're gonna be the 9 or the 10 seed.
But like that. But once you get to the playoff bracket, if you win the play-in game, you're gonna end up being the 8 seed, and you're gonna go play the Nuggets, who are probably gonna be the 1 seed, and you're gonna beat them. Which it's not crazy, but you probably don't want to put yourself in that position.
I think they do. I think they want to win the NBA Finals out of the play-in.
So they're just bored with actually competing for championships during the regular season. They're just like, yeah, we'll try it this way just to be fun.
Yeah. I think it's sort of kind of like that, right? Like they're, it's hard to maintain that level of championship juice for going on a decade now. When you've won as much as they have, when your trophy case is overflowing like theirs, when the value of your franchise is quadrupled or something in the last 10 years, I feel like it's human nature to take your foot off the gas a little bit. And all the other 29, well, I guess 28 of the other teams and the Wizards are trying to win. So, it's you can't stay great forever. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, that's certainly a factor, especially because last year felt like it was kind of the big one for them, right? Like it was the one where they could say, hey, we went out, we did this after we lost Kevin Durant. We proved that this core was the reason they were winning, and it wasn't just because that guy who, Kevin Durant definitely helped them win when he was there. I mean, he's great. Like you can't deny that Kevin Durant's presence there he made them virtually unbeatable, right? Like
they wouldn't have won 72 games without him.
Yeah, like they were already, among the favorites to win the title. They were, in fact, the betting favorite to win before they signed Kevin Durant. And then they just became them versus the field. And if you were smart, you would pick that. So this was kind of the one where it's like Steph was clearly the best player in the finals. That wasn't really the case in his first, 5 appearances because he was sharing the court with LeBron James. So it's kind of hard to be better than that dude. And even in the 1 year where LeBron wasn't there against Toronto, well, I think Steph outplayed Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi's team won. And typically when the team that wins, that's usually the guy who's going to get credit for being the best player, especially when he played really well. Kawhi was great in that series. So
And he hasn't played since, has he?
Basically.
Barely, yeah.
Although he has played as well as last 7 or 8 games.
7 or 8 games in 4 years.
Who knows how long it'll last? I'm not confident that Kawhi is going to stay hot without getting hurt. It's just not really what he does. Speaking of hurting people, or at least wanting to, Shannon Sharpe. I find this story humorous, but also kind of sad and inappropriate, right? Like, Shannon Sharpe almost started Donnybrook. It was more of a hold me back, bro situation.
Just a brouhaha.
Yeah, just a normal brouhaha during an NBA game in 2023, where he started chirping at Dylan Brooks of the Memphis Grizzlies, who is one of the most hateable players in basketball. So I get it. He
More
was
than
the guy
Grayson Allen?
Is Grayson Allen in
that
basketball?
says something that you're like waffling on that you're not really sure. That
he?
definitely says something about Brooks.
I would definitely take Grayson Allen just on reputation, and you throw in the fact that he's from Duke, and the fact that he looks like Ted Cruz, and the fact that
That's not what you want.
He fits all the negative tropes of being a former Duke basketball player that we associate with that program. But Dylan Brooks, it's hard to really give him a pass after what he did to Gary Payton II in the playoffs last year, right? Like, that was as flagrant of a flagrant foul as you can get. And it put Peyton out of that series and the conference finals. It was a miracle he even got back for the NBA finals, where he was essential for the Warriors to win that title. But anyway, Shannon Sharpe was lipping off to him, saying he was too small to guard LeBron, which is true. But Dylan wasn't having it, and so they got into a little back and forth. And Shannon was like standing on the court, basically telling him to come here and come see him with the hands or something like that. Then Steven Adams gets involved, which is not what you want if you're trying to live. And but Shannon, to his credit, didn't step away when Steven Adams was coming, probably because he knew there was going to be 6 or 7 people doing the hold me back, bro thing. So he knew he wasn't going to get stomped out courtside. But it was just a whole unnecessary thing. Ja's dad got involved. T. Morant was involved in the non-scuffle. And then Shannon Sharpe wasn't asked to leave. Right, like, he walked away for a bit while they settled things out, and then he went back to his seat.
He shouldn't have been asked to leave. He should have been told to leave.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah, like, normal people have said this all week. Like, if I was a normal person, if I was that person, I would have gotten kicked out and banned for life. I'm like, okay, On one hand, high-profile people get a little more leeway. Spike Lee's made a living out of it, right? Like, he's almost more known for being the most rabid Knicks fan than he is for his movies, which is crazy because movies are great. But he's gone over the line before, right? Like Reggie Miller doing what he did to him because he's Spike Lee and he acts a fool. But I find it so much more inappropriate when you're a member of the media, right? Like, you are the person that talks about the story every day on your show.
Yeah.
And then you've made yourself part of the story by picking fights. And the NBA can't like that either, because Shannon Sharpe goes on TV and he talks poorly of these players, right? Like, it's his job to go on TV and either speak well or poorly of certain players based on the way they're playing, based on how he feels about them. And then you show up courtside.
Based on how Skip feels about them, too.
Yeah, and Skip also is a factor there. But Skip Bayless ain't sitting courtside chirping at people. You know why? Because it would be a bad look if all the stuff that Skip has said about people, if players were going up there and wanting to fight dudes in the crowd. And these guys are professional provocateurs. Shannon Sharpe is part of that industry. He is a professional provocateur. And then he shows up on the court and doesn't keep his mouth shut, right? Like, you can say unpleasant things about athletes on TV or in a newspaper or wherever, but when you're at the game, you are media. You need to keep your mouth shut. You need to be an impartial observer. And Shannon Sharpe was absolutely not that. And to his credit, he apologized at length for his behavior, but this is just something that shouldn't happen in general. He shouldn't be sitting courtside yelling at anybody, like, period.
What is the deal with former Ravens Hall of Famers acting a fool this week, right? Like, why? Can't y'all just act normal for 5 minutes? But no, you got Ed Reed saying all this stuff. You got Shannon Sharpe running his mouth with all 79,000 teeth in his head. Like, this is unbelievable. So, you know, it's exhausting.
What else can you say?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move to football, professional football, that is, because that's the meat and potatoes of our show almost the entire year, even when it's the off season. We spend a lot of time on the NFL. Let's talk about what we saw this weekend. I guess we'll go in chronological order. Saturday afternoon game was the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe, I don't remember. Evan, did you pick the Jaguars to cover this line?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I did as well. So Corey was on the lonely island there, I think.
Yep.
And that
Your boy won 93 cents.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice work. Anyway, this game took some twists and turns that we probably didn't expect, and that is not a pun intended. But Patrick Mahomes getting injured and suffering a high ankle sprain is obviously the story to come from the game, and also probably the story of the outcome of the game, because it looked like the Jaguars were going to get blown out to start the game, right? Like they were not functioning well on offense. The Chiefs were moving the ball. Travis Kelce had 14 catches. The rest of the Chiefs had 13. So there you go. The Jaguars were notoriously bad against tight ends all year. They were 32nd in DVOA in defending tight ends, which, based on what I saw, makes sense. There were times where Travis Kelce was not covered by one guy. He probably should have been covered by two the entire time. And then Mahomes gets rolled up on. He's clearly injured as soon as you see it happen. He's hopping around on one leg. He stays in the game for a little while. He has a play where it looks like he normally would have run for a first down. Instead, he pump fakes and loses the ball and ends up becoming an incompletion. And they had to settle for a field goal. And that's where the Jags should have taken over and won the game, and they didn't. Right? Like, they get the ball next drive. They were down by 10, or down by 7, or 3 at that point. They were down by 3 points. They were in field goal range, got knocked out of field goal range with some penalties and a sack, and then had to punt, and then punted the ball to the 2-yard line, where Chad Henne was going to have to come in and lead a drive in the playoffs. And he did. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a dropped interception on that drive, right? Like,
of course.
Like, 2 Jaguars were right there to pick it off, and they had a clean path to the end zone. They make that pick. It's 14-10. The crowd goes silent. The game is effectively over at that point, right? Like, the crowd would never have come back at that point. They would have been done. And the Jags would have taken all the momentum and ridden that probably to a victory. Instead, they drop the pick. They have a 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness. They give up a 40-yard run to Pacheco, and they end up giving up a touchdown there. And I was like, well, that's your ball game. You're done now. You somehow – this is like a situation – because you knew Mahomes was going to come back in the game. Like, you knew he was going to find a way to settle that ankle down as much as he possibly could and shoot it up with whatever magic drugs they have, the same stuff that Aaron Rodgers had when he was, high as
ayahuasca.
Hell. Not the ayahuasca, but when he was just absolutely stoned against the Bears in week 1 of 2018, where he got rolled up on and he was injured. And he comes out there and he lights him up in Matt Nagy's first game. Your boy, Evan, your boy.
Coach of the year, Matt Nagy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It is right.
Yes. I didn't get him fired. He got himself fired. So
he did. He was terrible.
That. So bad. Anyway, this whole situation was just like, that was your window, Jags, and now you're behind by 10 on the road, and Mahomes is back out there. Even when you had a chance to maybe come back, Spiro Agnew or whatever his name is forced himself to fumble. I know, I'm being a smartass. I know his name's not Spiro Agnew. Spiro Agnew was Richard Nixon's vice president.
Might as well have been Spiro Agnew.
He almost cost you as much money as Spiro Agnew might have. But then, a legendary cover, though, for the Jags to get that field goal at the end. But obviously the main talking point from this game is going to be about Mahomes going forward. Clearly was not able to be mobile for the rest of the game. Looked like he struggled on some throws that he normally hits. Understandable, that's his plant leg. And honestly, a high ankle sprain. Like, they came out today and seemed to indicate that, he's doing a lot better than we thought he would be. I'm like, a high ankle sprain's a 6-week injury a lot of times. Like, there's no real sugarcoating it. He's going to be in some pain come next Sunday, and it's hard to imagine it won't affect his play.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he's hobbled, That's a big deal, right? Like Mahomes is their offense. With him and Kelsey, because defenses refuse to cover Kelsey. Going back to the Raiders, who cost me a fantasy matchup because he got 4 catches for 25 yards and 4 touchdowns. It's unbelievable. But if they don't have Mahomes, they're screwed. That's really all there is to it. They're not. If Mahomes doesn't play, or if he's a shell of himself, if he's only got one good leg, they can just forget it, right?
Yeah, I don't know how he can possibly be himself this weekend. Like, high ankle sprain typically keeps people out for multiple weeks. Like, and I get that a lot of times when you talk about high ankle sprains, you're talking about running backs, and like their ankles are pivotal to them. Like, no pun intended. Like, that's the only way that they can make their cuts is by having ankle strength, right? Like, Patrick Mahomes is maybe not quite the same thing, but he's a guy who can be mobile. He's a guy who relies on being able to get outside the pocket and move around at times. He's a guy that for every time that you think about these amazing throws that he makes on the run against his body, no look, like 99.9% of those, he's moving as he's throwing. And if he can't do that, then I don't know how he's going to be effective. And if he's not effective, the Bengals win this game.
I think the Bengals win with a healthy Mahomes, to be honest.
Potentially. They certainly have a chance.
We've seen this movie before.
They certainly have a chance. They did it last year.
Mm-hmm. The Bengals have beaten the Chiefs 3 straight times.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They beat them last year in the regular season. They beat them last year in the playoffs. They beat them this year in the regular season. So I think the Bengals also present a difficult matchup just because Tyreek Hill's not here, and I realize that hasn't really mattered, but this is the time where it will matter. I said this during the season. I said Mahomes and Andy Reid are too brilliant at what they do to not have an incredible offense during the regular season. But it's going to be a situation where you're going up against another team that also has a really good offense and that has the capacity to get stops on you occasionally with their defense. And it's those situations where you need that game changer. And Travis Kelce is obviously great, but the Bengals are really good against tight ends, right? They defend tight ends really well. If that's your only really functional weapon, and the rest of the time you just need to worry about defending Juju Smith-Schuster or Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you're going to be in good shape, right? Like, you should be able to contain that offense unless Mahomes does Mahomes magic. And without his legs, he's not going to be able to do that as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I unless he is less hurt than he looked, or he's just the warrior god that maybe he is. I mean, I don't tend to doubt Patrick Mahomes. He's incredible. I can't see him going out there and being anything close to 100%. Like, if he was 90%, I would feel pretty good about the Chiefs' chances. They're at home. They've been here before, all that good stuff. But if he's
every year,
if he's there at 75% going up against the Bengals, who look freaking awesome, yikes.
It's going to be cold in Kansas City on Sunday night as well. High temperature that day is 24, low is 8.
I don't think cold weather does good things for injured and swollen joints.
No.
That's just my experience. Okay, so let's talk about this Saturday.
Well, before we move on to that, just a little bit of a wrap up on the Jaguars. Yeah, they lost this game, but they still have to feel really good about what they've got going on down there in Duval County. I mean, this is a team that they had the fewest wins in the NFL each of the last 2 seasons, and they won a playoff game this year. Like, that's a remarkable turnaround. You talk about Trevor Lawrence, and last year there were a lot of question marks, and I would have said deservedly so at the time. Hindsight, we know that he was dealing with the Urban Meyer effect. That certainly was a handicap and a half, but he played really poorly. He didn't have a multi-touchdown game until the last game of the season against the Colts, which, how the Colts managed to lose that game is still beyond me. That was
Carson
ridiculous.
Wentz, how is it beyond you? Right?
But the Colts last year were actually decent. Anyway.
Same guy. He turns into a pumpkin in critical situations.
In any case, they come out the beginning of this season and still start out kind of slowly. Like, Trevor Lawrence still didn't look that good. The trade for Christian Kirk, he was playing pretty well, but he was their only guy and nobody else was playing well. So that was kind of looking like a bit of a dud, not so much because of Kirk himself, but because of a lack of anybody else to spread the offense around. And sure enough, Kirk became less and less a part of their game plan as the season went on, but Trevor Lawrence got better and better as the season went on. And then Travis Etienne emerges as a really good threat after he got rid of his fumbleitis early in the season. Doug Peterson, he can just flat out coach. At this point, there just can be no doubt about that. And the Jaguars have to be feeling really good about their coach-quarterback combination for the next several years.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that, I tweeted about it after they beat the Chargers and came back from the 27-0 deficit, was that Trevor Lawrence has a long way to go as far as I'm concerned. Like, he's got a lot to work on, but he's got it, and normally we're supposed to be highbrow analysts of football, but it's the same thing I felt about Joe Burrow last year, where I looked at him, I said, he's got just this ability, this charisma to lead a team, which is more important than people realize. And it also means that he's got the attitude that says, he's going to get better. He's going to keep taking those steps. We know he has the raw ability. We've known that since he was in college. The question was, and some people asked this question of him when he said he had the gall to say there's more to life than football. Is he really motivated to play football? Well, yeah, he looks pretty damn motivated to me. He's going to figure it out. I even said, like,
Brock Purdy said the same thing this past week.
Brock Purdy is playing for the NFC Championship in his rookie year as a 7th-round pick. So clearly he's got some correct attitude about these things.
Yep.
But, Trevor Lawrence, again, Corey, you mentioned Urban Meyer kind of, like, in hindsight, we look back on it, it's like, that wasn't hindsight. We looked at it at the time. We
knew that was going to be a disaster.
And we were looking at Trevor Lawrence and we're saying, yeah, he's been really bad. But he's got Urban Meyer as his coach. I basically treated like that. That wasn't even a rookie year. That wasn't year one. That was year zero. This was year one, effectively. And he looked like a rookie at times where he had his ups and downs, and he sort of leveled off a little bit. So he reached a level that certainly Jaguar fans, however many of them are in Duval County, should feel pretty good about their future. And I'm excited to see it's one more potentially great quarterback coming in the AFC, which
great.
I'm sure Evan's thrilled. Hopefully his team decides to keep their great quarterback, but that is a story for another time. Anything else on the Jags, Evan?
No.
Okay. So let's talk
Lamar
about
Jackson would look really good in Honolulu blue.
What team is that?
The Lions.
The Lions.
Is that what color that is?
Yeah.
Honolulu blue?
Yep.
Can we move on? I'm hungry.
All right, so let's talk about the Saturday night game briefly because it's not much of a game. The Eagles walloped the Giants as expected, I thought, but some people got ideas. And, that's what it was. The Giants were overmatched at just about every position. The Eagles are amazing. They've got, I think they've got probably a top 5 unit at just about every position group on the field, which is,
yes,
it's called a championship team. And the Giants were the 8th out of 8 by far left in the playoffs here, right? Like, the other 7 teams were so much better than the Giants were. Like, it was just their time. Like, Brian Daboll, excellent coaching year, although he did have some dumb punts in these situations. But it doesn't matter. Daniel Jones, probably going to get some money. I don't know how much. I wouldn't really be thrilled if my team was the one giving him the money, but he's at least earned enough to say, I am a starting quarterback in the NFL. Good for him. But it was just time for them. They had their shine. They were a fun story. Now it's time to cede the stage to the great teams.
I mean, it's like when UMBC beat Virginia in the NCAA tournament. It's like, oh, this is a cool story and everything. The little engine that could advance to the next round, but like, it's big boys time. No.
The interesting thing to watch for the Giants moving forward is going to be what that front office can do, because clearly Brian Dable won over the locker room pretty early on. Like, they were playing hard for him from day one this season. But there's nothing that will lose a locker room faster than going into your second season after a really strong first season as the head coach and not building the team around the pieces that are there. You have to go out and get some good players to come in. If you can't do that, then the players who were buying into your program be like, where are we going? Are we just going to be the same forever? I think that you can get very antsy very quickly in that kind of a situation, especially after you had that much success in year one.
Thing is, the Giants are objectively a bad team, right? They have a whole lot of pieces that need to be swapped out. So if people are complaining about the direction of the program or whatever, they're probably part of the problem, maybe sent up the road. So the Giants defense, it's not good. They have no receivers, right? They have zero. And the Vikings still couldn't cover these guys. Who are those people? No idea.
Well, you started one of them during 1 week of fantasy this year.
Yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson. Because he caught a touchdown against the Ravens. I saw it with my eyeballs. And then I started him the next week, bagel. And then he gets hurt and is out for the year. Great.
I picked up Cody Bellinger to be my tight end after Zach Ertz got hurt, and immediately he got poked in the eye and didn't play again for like 4 weeks. And
I doubt it was Cody Bellinger.
Cody Bellinger, like the former Dodger?
What is his first name if it's not Cody?
I have no idea who you're talking about. So
there was a Giants tight end named is Daniel Bellinger.
Daniel Bellinger.
Well, I understand why you said Cody, because he's actually
relevant Bellinger.
Yeah, he was good at one point. He was a league MVP.
Yeah, this guy's a rookie tight end. I couldn't remember his first name.
Fair enough. It doesn't matter. You probably never say it again.
Probably not.
Although, shout out to you, Daniel Bellinger, if you ever make it on this podcast again, because that means you did something good. Hopefully, don't go do anything bad. Anyway,
we'll see if tight end is even still a full-time position in our league next year. It depends on this vote.
We'll talk about that later. And by later, I mean not on this show.
Okay.
Well, not on this episode of the show, at least. Anyway, so the Giants, just to kind of finish them off, I agree with you, Corey. I think there can be some situations where you have a little bit too much success for your own good that first year because, like you said, like Evan said appropriately, this team isn't very good talent-wise. And they've got a lot of holes to fill. They've got contracts to pay. I think that Saquon Barkley needs to get paid, if I'm recalling correctly. And
yes.
Daniel Jones is either going to walk or get tagged or get paid. And if you tag him, that means he's getting paid. So that's kind of an awkward situation to be in. And it reminds me a little bit of Matt Nagy, where this first year they go to the playoffs, they win the division, and he had Mitch Trubisky looking like a pretty good quarterback. And so that kind of became the expectation. And then when Trubisky revealed himself to still not be very good the following season, Matt Nagy had no chance at that point. Now, Nagy did plenty of other stuff to mess up his coaching prospects, but that certainly didn't help. And I feel like the Giants now have expectations, and they shouldn't, because the team it's still not ready. It's still in a rebuild. And I think that's what the focus needs to be for the organization is, yeah, we had a surprisingly good year where we actually won a playoff game. But we won that playoff game because we happened to come up against the most fraudulent team of all time, and we beat them. And then we got boat raced by a real team. We're not really contenders. So let's talk about the victors, the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts back in the lineup after a sustained absence at the end of the season due to a shoulder injury. A lot of questions about his health and how effective he would be. He looked pretty good to me.
Yeah,
And a lot of
definitely looked
questions
better
about
than he did in Week 18 when he came out and threw I think he went 15 for 25 in that game, which isn't terrible, but certainly a lot higher incompletion percentage than we had been used to seeing from him this season. Yeah, I mean, he came out and he looked really good this week. He was hooking up with Dallas Goedert at will. He's getting the ball to Smith. Brown got a couple early catches and then was frustrated because he wasn't as heavily involved later in the game. But they did a really good job all around, and the run game was looking pretty solid too.
Oh yeah, and go ahead, Evan.
I mean, the Eagles are an absolute wagon, so it shouldn't have been a surprise to me, some idiot who bet on the Giants, that the Eagles rolled the Giants. It shouldn't have been a surprise.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
I have to call Berman and tell him to change it up. Get himself a Eagles circle jersey too. Yeah, the Eagles look great. The concerns about Lane Johnson's injury, clearly not an issue because he was great out there.
Not my groin. Doesn't he have a torn groin?
Yeah, but he looked awesome. Like, he was dominating as he usually does. Like, he was absolutely terrific. The Eagles defense, I think, gets slept on a little bit in all this because they're really, really good. Like, their pass rush is filthy. And I feel like if they get past the 49ers, if they go into the Super Bowl with that type of front seven, going up against either the Bengals with a little bit of a maligned situation up front, or
backups,
or Patrick Mahomes who's probably still not going to be 100% even 3 weeks from now. Who, buddy? Like that, you could be seeing some more horse poop being consumed and more light poles being climbed and all kinds of hijinks in Philadelphia going on at that point because they look like they're the real deal. I try not to get too caught up in what you see week to week because they were playing an overmatched team and the 49ers are very much not that. But this is going to be an awesome game, I think. Between them and San Francisco, who we'll talk about in a second. Like I honestly, I'm glad we're not picking today because I don't know. Like that's a legitimate toss-up as far as I'm concerned.
On to Cincinnati.
Okay, on to Cincinnati and Buffalo. We kind of previewed this episode by dumping on the Bills a little bit. So we're going to zag a little bit here. Let's talk about the Bengals first. Yeah, awesome performance by them going out in the snow. Joe Burrow looked, like I predicted on this show, unflappable. And I don't think that's really a bold prediction. We've watched him play for a long time now in both college and the NFL. And he's that guy. He's unflappable all the time. And the Bengals looked like the better team from the outset. First drive, right down the field, score a touchdown, force a 3-and-out, score more points. It felt like at that point, the Bills are really close to letting go of the rope, and they eventually scored a touchdown. But then the Bengals came right down the field and scored another one, got the 10-point lead back, and then we didn't really hear from the Bills again.
Yeah.
What else is there to say? Like, the Bengals defense has been underrated, I think, in the last couple of years. Like, their pass rush is really effective. We like to make fun of them because they have Eli Apple, but their safety tandem is the best in the league, and that kind of covers for the fact that you've got the most toastable loudmouth corner in football. Like that's the weakness is Eli Apple, but they've got the ability to cover for it. And it was all three phases ass whooping was this game. Like, it was just the Bills came out and got dusted by a better team.
In the dusting of snow.
Yeah, for 3.5 hours at home. And we can talk about the Bills and their ineptitude and what this means for them going forward, but the Bengals are, a lot of people thought they might take a step back because they seemed like they got lucky last year with their Super Bowl run, right? Like they caught some breaks along the way. This year is not like that. This year they are a wagon. They feel like they could beat anybody any given Sunday. And they
know it too.
And they feel like they should be favored against anybody any given Sunday. Like I said, 5.5 points last week was nuts going into Buffalo with what we'd seen from the Bengals and the Bills recently. And sure enough, they went in there and whooped that ass.
96 cents for me, by the way.
Yeah.
I posted in our chat, like, watching that game, it looked like the Bills were the only team that was playing in the snow. Like, they looked so much slower. They kept slipping and falling. Meanwhile, the Bengals on the same field at the same time were just a well-oiled machine. Jamar Chase is open over the middle. Burrow just scoots out of trouble and just flips it right to him for a touchdown.
Jamar Chase was open everywhere. Hayden Hurst was open everywhere.
Hayden Hurst was open everywhere. Oh my God.
Joe Mixon was running everywhere. Nobody could slow him down.
Samaje Perine was taking people for a ride.
This Bengals team is really good. Joe Burrow, I think, now has the most playoff wins of any quarterback in Bengals history, maybe any player in Bengals history.
I think he already had that going into today.
Or did he? I thought that was coming out of the Bills game, but maybe it was going in. In any case,
he was tied. I think he and
that's what I thought, was that he was tied going into that game.
Yeah, so now he's got 5. We know Andy Dalton didn't have any.
No.
We know Carson Palmer didn't have any with the Bengals. He didn't get his first until the Cardinals game where they gave up the 2 Hail Marys to Rodgers, but then
and you know what?
Saved the day.
Give Zach Taylor a little bit of credit, because as much as we complain about Zach Taylor's inability to coach in game, clearly he is able to get this team ready to go on Sundays. He's devised something that is working for this team, because teams don't usually, even really good teams, don't usually win in spite of terrible coaches.
I feel like Zach Taylor, all the time he's on the sideline, it's like he's trying to lick his nose but can't really get it. He's always got his tongue out and it's pointed directly up on his upper lip. But like, Eric, I'm wondering, what does someone have to do to graduate from your list other than get fired? Right?
Well, I've already said that. I said last week that Zach Taylor has earned a probationary period from the list because of the way he handled the DeMar Hamlin situation. I talked about that last week. And after this week, I'm kind of glad that he's not on the list for the time being, because he whooped Sean McDermott's ass.
And that's saying something, because we all very much respect Sean Dermott's coaching ability.
I'm a little worried about him. I'm a little worried about him.
I'm a little bit worried now, but it was one game. I'm not going to completely freak out about it. 2 games.
He blew the Chiefs game last year. That was inexcusable to give up that field goal with 13 seconds left. They played no defense. It falls on him. I'm just saying, this is 2 straight playoff losses where he was directly involved in the outcome.
Fair enough.
I'm not saying he's going to be on my list. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm just saying, from a Buffalo Bills franchise perspective, it feels like they've peaked, right? Like, they made the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, got housed. Then this last season, they were within 13 seconds of going to the AFC Championship game, hosting the AFC Championship game, which now looks a little dubious because they hosted this game against the Bengals and they got crushed. So maybe they wouldn't have won the AFC last year even if they had escaped Kansas City. But I'm just saying, like, it's at the point where it doesn't feel like there's a great identity with this team offensively. It's just Josh Allen do stuff, right? They don't have a running game, haven't for years. Their offensive line's been bad for a long time, right? Like, they seem to whiff on all those picks constantly. They're going to have to start paying Josh Allen. Like, his big contract is actually going to start hitting the salary cap pretty hard. And it feels like this was their shot, and they were anemic in a playoff game after almost blowing it to the Dolphins, who had a 3rd-string quarterback. It feels like they're going backwards, and I don't know if they have the means to right the ship. And a lot of times that, rightly or wrongly, falls on the head coach. He's the one that gets blamed. I'm not saying they're going to fire him this year, but I'm just saying his seat could get a little warm if the Bills have a similar outcome next year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, that's sort of the nature of the NFL playoffs. Your performance in the playoffs defines your legacy. So, like, if you don't get it done in the playoffs, that sort of hangs over you. And since it's single elimination, you have a bad game, your season is over. So, it's you got to execute in critical situations because there's no guarantee that you'll ever get back to this spot.
Also, I feel compelled to say this because it's been a topic of conversation a lot this season. Joe Burrow is better than Josh Allen. Let's put that aside. There's no conversation anymore. He's a better quarterback. I realize that Allen is flashier. He puts on a show. I love Josh Allen. He's a great player to watch. But he reminds me more of Brett Favre than he does of Tom Brady, right? Like, he's a one-man show. He's electric. He can carry a team to a win. But, man, he makes a lot of mistakes. And those mistakes cost you playoff games. He has a lot of games where he can't find anybody or can't hit anybody like he did on Sunday. Those cost you playoff games. And, Joe Burrow was a better college player than Josh Allen was. He was a better NFL prospect coming out of the draft than Josh Allen was. And he's been better the last 2 years than Josh Allen was. I think it's safe to say that, it's Mahomes 1, Burrow 2 at this point if we're keeping it a buck.
I'll agree with the comparison, but I will say that Josh Allen right now is better than peak Brett Favre, in my opinion.
Peak Brett Favre won 3 straight MVPs.
What was his competition?
Steve Young and Dan Marino and John Elway and Troy Aikman and Barry Sanders.
Among others.
A lot of those guys were in run-first offenses.
Well, what about Emmitt Smith then? Right? The all-time leading rusher in the history of the league.
MVPs.
Emmitt Smith won
Adrian
an MVP.
Peterson
He did win
won
a
an
MVP,
MVP,
that's
didn't
true.
Yeah, so did
Eddie
Barry
George
Sanders.
won an MVP.
And so did Barry Sanders.
Didn't O.J. Simpson win an MVP or just a Heisman? Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, we have now digressed to O.J. Simpson. Let's get back to focus. I told you, though, Evan, I told you on the way down to King's Dominion this week that Corey is a Brett Favre hater. He does not like Brett Favre, and he doesn't give him his due.
Brett Favre was great.
Because Brett Favre is a jerk.
Brett Favre is a horrible person.
He's a terrible person, but he's
Yeah.
a fantastic quarterback, albeit mistake prone.
I think he gets a lot more credit than he deserves for the game after his father died.
I agree with that, but
I think that's where 98% of the Brett Favre love comes from.
and supposedly 98% of your disdain for him.
I wouldn't say that my disdain comes from that. I have a lot of respect for what he did in that game, but I don't think that one game makes a legacy. Like, it was an amazing moment. My hat's off to him for it. I was quite frankly happy that he had such a good game after that because I felt like that's a terrible circumstance. But that doesn't make him some amazing quarterback for the rest of his career.
Yeah, just the 3 MVPs. That's what makes him.
Yeah, just 3 MVPs and a Super Bowl championship.
And the most interceptions of all time.
I mean,
Albert
Albert Pujols is grounded in the most double plays of all time.
Yeah, Albert Pujols
You got to be
sucks.
pretty good to stick around long enough to make that many bad plays, right?
We're moving on before Corey audibly says that Albert Pujols sucks on this podcast. We're trying to maintain some level of credibility. Let's talk about the final game, which was, pretty interesting, if not super high scoring, which I don't think we really thought it would be. The 49ers beat the Dallas Cowboys 19-12, I believe was the score. It was a weird score.
That game almost put me to sleep.
You got 4 field goals kicked by the 49ers. Another missed PAT from Brett Maher, although he did get it together. He made a chip shot field goal like 25 yards, right?
Yeah, and then he made like a 42-yarder.
He made a longer field goal later, and so good for him. Happy that he didn't have another episode where he was just missing all the kicks, because if he was missing all the kicks, they would have just blamed him, and instead we're going to blame Dak Prescott because he was bad. Yes. Yet again against this 49ers team in a playoff game, and there's nowhere to hide this time. Right, like you can't
hide behind McCarthy with the bad play calling. Like, McCarthy wasn't throwing those horrible passes directly to people wearing red jerseys.
Yeah, and let's actually get that out of the way with McCarthy. He's being skinned for that ridiculous play that they ran.
What was that?
5 seconds
the pitchy woo failure.
The thing is, I have 2 thoughts on this, and they're sort of competing with each other. On one hand, I question Mike McCarthy's general survival skills in that situation because he goes out there with his goofy formation, and why would you draw unnecessary attention to what it was by all accounts a doomed play, right? Pitchy pitchy woo woo never works. It's not going to work. So just run the normal pitchy pitchy woo woo and
It
see
works
how
for the
long
other
it goes
team sometimes.
before eventually the guy falls over and you lose the game. Instead, you've got Ezekiel Elliott as the center. However, I understand the strategy a little bit. I understand putting 11 shiftier, speedier guys with better hands during a situation where they're going to be running around playing backyard football or backyard rugby in this case, trying to get to the end zone, which is 76 yards away. I get the logic behind it, but even if that is a better way to do it, you are extracting such minimal amounts of win probability and looking really, really stupid while doing it. So just don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not worth it, man. And like McCarthy had this entire season where half the league couldn't coach to save their lives, and he somehow wasn't on the list of those guys, right? Like he somehow was not one of the coaches that had a bad year. When even some of the good coaches had bad years. He hasn't had a season this positive, including the one that he didn't even coach, because stories came out about how lazy he was since like 2013. This is his first good year in a decade. And now you're still a talking point on First Take because you went out there and did this. Like, you didn't have to be this way, Mike. Just take your W. And
take your L.
And take your L in this case, but take your W as far as being a respectable coach for this season. Don't draw attention to yourself. Just kind of, you need to understand your situation. Just kind of need to slough off into the off season, and we'll just be, oh yeah, Mike McCarthy, and that's it. Instead, we're like, oh, Mike McCarthy, the second year in a row, he did the dumbest thing imaginable at the end of a playoff game.
I mean, yeah, this is on Dak though. Like, he was bad. And where is he throwing the ball at half the time? I don't understand.
He's the second worst quarterback of the week, according to Football Outsiders.
The second worst.
Yeah, Danny Dimes.
Oh, Danny Dimes was worse. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like Dak. I think we know what he is at this point. This is year 7.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a little better than Kirk, but
the comparison makes more and more sense every year. It seems like.
Yeah, the key word is a little, or the key phrase a little. He's not much better than Kirk Cousins, and I feel like he's a guy where I know that he played badly in this game. People are going to start talking crazy like the Cowboys should get rid of him. And I'm like, you're not going to get anybody better, right? Like, he's still a top 10 quarterback in the league. He's probably number 10. But, you got to kind of just accept that at this point. Like, he's not going to be a guy that is going to carry you to wins. He can get you wins when you've got the advantages. We saw that last week against Tampa. He was great when the wind was at his back. And that's better than most quarterbacks. But if you're hoping for him to be Roger Staubach or something like that, keep dreaming, because he ain't that.
The Niners were incredible, though. Give them some credit, too.
And Brock Purdy had his moments of looking
like
not
a rookie.
great. But, that just defense is great.
Yeah,
Running
defense
game
kept them
didn't
in
really
it, and the offense, I mean, they never gave up on their plan on offense, even as the Cowboys were really kind of shutting down the running game with CMC and Elijah Mitchell. Like, they just kept pounding it, and eventually Christian McCaffrey wound up having a beast of a drive and basically gave the 49ers the lead for good at that point. I don't know what they were doing there at the very end, like just using Elijah Mitchell exclusively. Like, you're trying to run the clock out. You're trying to clinch the game. The game is not over yet, and your best player is not on the field. That is a big misstep on Kyle Shanahan's part, in my opinion. But they won the game, so.
Well, and it wasn't like Elijah Mitchell did a bad job running. He had the one shouldn't have gone out of bounds situation, but he was certainly picking up the yards, right? Like, he did enough from that standpoint. So I'm not going to knock Shanahan too much. I know that we're Christian McCaffrey guys here, especially Corey, because probably has a little bit of angst from the fantasy football season watching Elijah Mitchell vulture carries from CMC. But I don't really take issue with that. Shanahan had a couple of other moments, though, that he's had in the playoffs where you're like, dude, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be smart. Oh, you're not paying attention. What's going on? He ran the unnecessary amount of clock down at the end of the first half. I don't know what he was doing there. I mean, they got away with it because they still got a field goal out of it, and if they had 28 more seconds, do they get a touchdown out of it? Maybe, probably not. So in the end, it didn't really actually cost them, but that's the type of stuff that will cost you, right? Like what
cost them against Philly this week.
Oh yeah, it's like you can't play around with the Eagles. They will take advantage of your mistakes. And let's just go back to the Eagles real quick. Nick Sirianni is pissing a lot of people off just by being himself, which is
incredible. I
kind of enjoy that. I like that too, especially because like he's out there doing the dramatic head nod and stuff at the camera and stuff like that. This was the guy that could barely get a word out during his press conference. He was stumbling and stuttering and so nervous, and we were all just kind of making fun of him, saying, "Look at this clown. He's going to get fired after 2 weeks." And now he's out here, got maybe the favorite to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
like it's quite a turnaround, and I got to give him props for it.
He's done an incredible job. He's been great.
Yep. Yes, he has been. Anything else we want to say about the Cowboys?
Nope. Smell y'all later.
Yeah.
Not gonna miss you. I will miss
28 years now without an NFC Championship game appearance.
It's been how long?
It'll be 28 years now without an NFC Championship game appearance.
28 years. Oh my goodness.
The Cowboys are like the weirdest team about that because, like, normally teams with that long of a drought, like the Washington football team has
or the Lions
has a nearly as long a drought.
Washington football team has a longer drought. They're at like 30 years, I think.
That's what I'm saying. Like they've had a longer drought. The Lions, I think, 1991 also was the last time they made it because they lost to the Washington football team back then. But like the Cowboys is almost as long. It's only 4 years shorter. But the Lions and Washington have been comically bad during that stretch. The Cowboys have been
comically
upright.
Average.
Yeah, like they've made the playoffs. They've won division titles regularly.
They've been the 1 seed at least twice in my memory.
Yeah.
And they lost at home.
Both times,
and yet somehow August 8th is National Dallas Cowboys Day every year.
Is that because of Des Bryant?
That's because of 8-8. Like 8-8. 500.
Well, that doesn't really work anymore because they play 17 games now. So maybe you have to make it 8-9.
Yeah,
but,
there you go.
The next day.
Maybe 9-8. Give them a little bit of benefit. But yeah, I think the Cowboys are just. I think this is just who they are. They're stuck, right? Like they've got a good, very good, even sometimes quarterback, but not a great one. And honestly, I think it's like it sounds illogical, but frankly, quarterbacks aren't as good as they used to be, right? Like there aren't that many elite ones. There aren't that many ones where you feel confident this guy can win a Super Bowl for you. Like, there's like 5 of those in the NFL, maybe 6. But there used to be like 12, right? Yeah. Like you feel pretty good about this guy. He's going to be the franchise quarterback.
Were there 12 ever?
Yeah. Yeah, there were definitely 12. Like in 2012, when you had Cam Newton, you had Matt Ryan, you had Brady, Rodgers, Breeze, Manning, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Tony Romo, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III. You tell me that.
And the Super Bowl champion Joe Flacco.
Joe Flacco, hon.
Yeah.
Trust me, the bench was deeper for quarterbacks back then. Like the fact that we're talking about Justin Herbert being top 5 and he hasn't done anything. And you can't really argue the point because there's nobody really better than him other than maybe 4 or 5 other guys. I
think there's a couple of differences. One of them is that some of those names that you just mentioned hadn't done anything. Matt Ryan had not done anything at that point in time.
Made a conference championship game in 2012. What are you talking about?
The other thing is that those players were all kind of staggered in when their careers started, whereas a lot of these really good quarterbacks right now, they're all playing at the same time, which means inevitably there's going to be some of those players who are really good, maybe as good as some of those players you just listed from back in 2012, who aren't going to make that deep of a playoff run because they've got the competition of all these other really good players around them.
I think Colin Kaepernick deserves mention as well.
Yes. Yeah, throw him in there.
Selling those mighty wings. McDonald's.
I think it's less about the quarterbacks and more about the coaching, personally.
That's a fair take. I'm not going to say that's necessarily wrong, but my point is this. It's harder to get people to come to your program when they feel there's only a couple of quarterbacks that are going to make them better. They're going to go there instead, and they're going to load up those teams. Who's going to go to the Cowboys and say, hey, let me go play for Dak Prescott? Who's going to do that? You go play for Jalen Hurts.
That's why there's a salary cap. Can only
the
load up
Cowboys
so
have
much.
expanded it too much. They have expended their salary cap. They're paying Ezekiel Elliott, who is cooked. They're paying Dak Prescott. They're going to have to pay C.D. Lamb soon. They're out of money, man. They're going to have to pay Micah Parsons, who is the best player on the football team.
Oh, my God. He blocked McGlinchey. How do you throw a 300-pound man to his back against his will?
The only reason we even know the name McGlinchey.
I mean,
But he was a Pro Bowler, wasn't he?
He made McGlinchey look like Ezekiel Elliott on that last play.
Yes, Ezekiel Elliott got devoured.
I felt so bad for him.
I didn't.
Okay. That's fine. If you don't want to feel bad for him, that's okay. So I think that kind of exhausts our football topics. Although I didn't do best and worst, did I?
No.
I have to find the sheet. Or Corey, you could read it off for me because I don't know where it is.
Oh, well, it's down there near the bottom. Best quarterback of the week was Joe Burrow. He was excellent. Worst was Danny Nichols. Best running back by both total and rushing DYR was Joe Mixon. The worst by both was James Cook. Of course, Dalvin Cook.
He's an absolute bum.
Dalvin Cook was the worst by rushing last week. Or, I'm sorry, was the worst by total last week. I forget who was the worst by rushing, but it was two different players. Anyway, the best receiver of the week was George Kittle. He was amazing and had an amazing catch in particular. And then Jamal Agnew was the worst. And he was bad.
The unforced fumble at the 4-yard line. You're just gonna grass it right here. Just lay it down softly like an egg.
Unbelievable.
Oh, jeez.
I also don't get all the fools who were like apoplectic that the Jamar Chase touchdown got overturned. I'm like, he didn't have the ball in his hands and he was laying out of bounds. It was on his gut. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, you have to catch the ball.
Also, shout out to Dalton Schultz for, if not for his nonchalant incompetence, we wouldn't have gotten that awesome last play. They probably would have thrown a Hail Mary.
Yeah, he like I said, nonchalant. Need you to be a little bit more chalant in the playoffs on the road with under a minute to play.
Yep.
Do we want to I saw that Evan put his where he's leaning on the games in there. Do we want to kind of do that real quick and just tell where we're leaning here early in the week? Obviously, we won't make our official picks until a little bit later in the week.
Probably Friday.
Yeah.
I was looking on FanDuel earlier. So I'm leaning Niners plus 2.5, and I was leaning Bengals plus 1.5, but now it's down to 1.0.
Oh, so those actually are like what the lines currently are?
Yeah.
I was thinking more like, what would be the number that it needs to be at for you to pick one team or the other?
Like against the lines almost situation?
Yeah.
No, I mean, if I were to pick right now, that's what I would pick. Well, I think the Bengals are going to win, like just straight up.
I think they probably are too. So I'm pretty sure the Bengals aren't going to end up being favored in this game unless they just straight up rule Mahomes out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as long as Mahomes plays, I think they'll hold on to being favorites, especially because they're at home. But, if the Bengals are getting points, I'm taking the Bengals. Like, I don't think I'm moving off of that position at all. The Eagles 49ers, like I said, I thought the game was a toss-up in the first place. And I feel like, I don't know, Philly strikes me as a team that I thought that maybe you would see a little bit more of a, hey, look what we just did type of line, which would have favored them by 3.5 or 4. But it looks like the wise guys in Vegas are wise to that, so they don't have that. But I'm probably taking whoever's getting points in this situation. So the 49ers are currently getting points. If it moves to Philly getting points, I might go with the Eagles. So I think this should be a pick 'em.
For me, if the 49ers are getting less than 3, I'm taking the Eagles. I think that's where the line should be. I think that on a neutral site, these two teams are probably pretty evenly matched. It's in Philly, so it should be Philly minus 3. If it's anything but that, that's going to determine who I'm taking in that game. With the Bengals and the Chiefs, so much hinges on Mahomes' health. And I know that he woke up Sunday morning reportedly feeling a lot better than the team expected him to, but what that actually means is up to interpretation. Like, did they expect that he was just going to be like moaning in bed, unable to stand up, and he got up and was able to go to the John? Like, and that's all it was? Because like that would still be waking up feeling better than they expected him to. Still not good. So honestly, I feel like it would take a lot for me to move off of the Bengals. Like, the Bengals could probably be laying some points, and I might still take them right now. I don't know exactly what that number is. If I don't hear any significant good news, I'd probably say if the Bengals are laying up to 3.5, I'll take the Bengals. More than that, I'll have to think a little harder about it.
Okay, so heavy on the Bengals. So that's about all we got, unless, Corey, you want to read off who won the week or whatever.
I mean, you won the week 4-0.
I'm talking more about the fans. Of course, I won the week. I was unstoppable this week. I know what I was doing.
So
about time.
James Daly had a bounce back week. He got 3 correct picks along with Andrew. I think Sean had 1 correct pick. I don't have the document right in front of me, but going off memory, pretty sure Sean had 1 correct pick, which still better than James' opening week of the playoffs. But James, I believe, still has the fan lead in the overall contest for the year. Yeah, there you go. So we'll send out a ballot this week on Friday with the last with these 2 games and their lines, and we'll have our picks post up on our website on Friday as well.
Very good. I guess before we get going, I guess we'll briefly talk about it. I alluded to this earlier. Evan and I made our first coaster trip of 2023. We stopped by Funland in Fredericksburg and walked in, paid $8, rode the Twist and Shout, and then walked right out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And then we drove down to Kings Dominion, spent a few hours down there.
In the freezing cold.
It was quite cold, but Twisted Timbers was great.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was
I can't imagine riding a roller coaster in the cold. That is like, I remember back in college, like riding on Chris Nash's scooter in the cold, and it was just absolutely like horrible.
Well, plus you're with Chris Nash.
Well, that too, but even beyond that,
help things improve. But yeah, I thought that riding Twisted Timbers in the cold was fine. Like, I didn't have any issue there with the cold. When we got on Dominator, I was kind of like, oh boy, this is a bit much.
Oh yeah, Dominator felt so much colder, and I can't really explain why.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know
Maybe
how
it's faster.
Yeah, it might be a faster ride, but yeah, it was. At that point, I was like, okay, we can go. Like, I'm good. We got 8 rides in on Twisted Timbers. I think that's a pretty good day, especially because we walked in here without paying. So
yes,
that's not. We paid in advance.
We paid in advance. We didn't spend any money in the park at all.
That's true.
So
that's true. So yeah, that's all we got this week. Thank you guys for tuning in. You can reach us and reach out for mailbags or criticisms or praise or whatever you are into at thesportsballers@gmail.com. You can get us on any podcatcher pretty much that are out there, the main ones, Apple, Spotify, Google, or Amazon. And if you have a particular podcatcher that you prefer us to be on, we will do our best to get on there. Again, shoot us an email, and we will do our best to reach you there. You can also follow us on Twitter at SportsBallers18, or you can follow us individually. Corey is at Corey Puffett. I am at Quagmire67, and Evan is at Evan_Ash13. Before we hit it, fellas, any shout-outs?
Another shout out to Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann for another great episode of The Last of Us last night. I am thoroughly enjoying that series, enjoying the podcast that Troy Baker is hosting. I'm enjoying the, inside the episode shorts that they're doing for it. It has been really, really good. It's been staying pretty true to the video game, and the alterations that they're making have made sense to me. So they're doing a fantastic job. And also shout out to you, Eric, for doing a really nice job on the color commentary with Stephen April on Friday for the hockey game.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that was a good time. Steven was very into the game, which I appreciated. Unfortunately, he was so into it that I started getting into it, and multiple times I yelled, "Yeah!" when DeMathis scored goals, like I was watching a Caps game at home.
You're on DM Stags TV.
I understand that, but I'm supposed to be analyzing, not cheering, right? Like,
do the full Hawk Harrelson, just go all in.
I mean, to be fair, the previous one that I did with Stephen McDonald, it wasn't so much that he was low energy. It was just the fact that DeMatha didn't score any goals until like the last minute.
Yeah,
and they were down 4-0.
That was a rough one.
So it wasn't a whole lot to get excited about, whereas this is a 3-3 tie with Spalding, who apparently are called the Cavaliers. I didn't actually know that was their mascot.
Yep. But anyway, if anybody wants to catch that game, it is we're not able to broadcast it live because for whatever reason, even though I had an internet connection, it refused to connect to YouTube. But we did record it, and it is up on DM Stags TV on YouTube, so you can catch that. Eric and Steven did a really nice job.
All right, Evan.
Already. I don't have any shout-outs. I guess shout-out to you, Eric, for putting up with me being a degenerate coaster enthusiast. Let's go to King's Dominion in the freezing cold. It was fun.
Yeah, let's stop by this, little arcade / whatever for one ride.
Family entertainment center.
Yeah. They tried to sell me 2 rides on it. I was like, nah, just one.
2 rides.
But you want 2 rides on Twist and Shout? I was like, nah.
No,
1 ride.
just one. One and done.
Pay my $8. It was fun. It was a nice little.
It had a little extra giddy up than I was expecting.
Yeah, I liked it.
Get those creds.
Got to get those creds of up to
200. Got 206.
There you go.
So.
Oh yeah. My shout out, same as last week. Shout out to Bomani Jones. Season 2 of Game Theory premiered last Friday. First episode was quite good. Nick Wright was his guest, and they talked a little NBA, and it was a lot of fun. Those two have really good chemistry, and the story, if you will, it's not exactly the same as John Oliver's show, but on player empowerment and how that's a bit of a myth in the NBA was revealing and quite humorous at times. So I highly recommend people check that out.
I will do that.
And I will be watching The Last of Us tonight to get caught up on that as well. So preemptive shout out to the creators as well, because I'm sure the episode will be quite good like the first one was. So thank you guys for tuning in. Evan will have control of the show next week. He will be talking about, I guess, who's going to be in the Super Bowl, among other things. Until then, take it easy.